Hello and welcome to this session. We are honored to have with us Dr. Rajiv Kumar, who is the Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog. Dr. Kumar, what an honor to have you with us.
Hi, Kumar. Good. Great pleasure to be here. Delighted.
Dr. Kumar, this is obviously a time of great disruption at our individual levels, for the economy, for businesses, for people. And you have obviously led several organizations and are in a leadership role in a very important organization right now. What are some of your key takeaways and learnings in terms of leadership in times of crisis and disruption, such as what we've been going through?
It's a very important question, Kumar, and it's only in such times of crisis that the quality of leadership begins to matter even more than what it does in normal times. I am a firm believer that leadership matters, and so it's not just some people would argue that if you've got the organizational structure right and the processes right, etc., then things leadership really doesn't matter. You can be what is called parametrically driven rather than but I would always believe that leadership does matter even in the most parametrically driven organization. But in these times of crisis, it matters, of course, much more. And the two or three aspects of it. See, one is that if you want to convert the crisis into an opportunity, then you've got to motivate your team to start thinking differently and working even harder at this sort of time. So therefore, that the crisis has shown very often that the business as usual will not work. And if you continue with the business as usual, then you won't be able to come out of it in the manner that you should. So therefore, you now have to start thinking in terms of shifts that you have to make in the way you do things, in the way you may suggest policy, or in evidence that you want to look at, etc. So, and the team has to therefore start thinking differently. Now it's up to the leadership whether we can whether we can drive the people to think differently, to go and collect evidence from different sources than what they've been doing so far, for example, and to look at what are the emerging constraints and bottlenecks, and then how to tackle them. So that's one part of, I think, the leadership role. The second part of the leadership, the role in such crisis is really to motivate people to just be more evidence based, and not take things for granted or not assume things. In the past, sort of the hypotheses or the assumptions that you might have made are not no more valid. So therefore, you need to go out and collect the evidence that you have to get. And finally, I think at least in the government, the crisis has brought up a very strong need for coordination and and thinking horizontally rather than just thinking sort of linear, and go across to ministries and go across agencies, go across to the states, and then work out the sort of policies through a much more extensive system of stakeholder consultation that you have, simply because the crisis brings out even in greater relief that one size will not fit all, and therefore because when the tide goes out, it leaves different areas of the sea under different sort of coverage, as it were, and which is the same thing that happens in a crisis like that. So I think therefore the leadership really has to, in some sense, reboot the organization. In some sense, make the organization start, get out of a business as usual mold, and start, doing things and thinking of issues differently than what they've done in the past.
I think you said something very important in terms of how government is now looking at solutions even more proactively by going horizontal and perhaps more closely even looking at the federal structure and how it can relate to different ministries, different departments. Um, taking that forward to the private sector, to startups, to large enterprises, and even to SMEs, what are some of the things that all of us can do to seize this moment? It could be a reboot moment, it could be a restart moment. What do you think we can do better?
I think, Kumar, the way, manner in which you could do things is one, of course, to build up capacity at the moment. Use this time, to build up capacity in terms of technology, in terms of market access, information, information flows that you have, and also tie up, as it were, some better sources of more reasonably rated price finance, as it were. So that's the sort of thing that I would do. Again, I would look at in all these cases, especially now, that the global and regional value chains are undergoing a massive shift as people, as companies wanting to move out of particular geographies to minimize or diversify their country risks. Now you need to look at that. Now you need to look at how can I create joint ventures? Who are the possible partners out there, and how could I become a more effective player in the regional value chain production network or in the global production network. Also, again, I think the startups, especially, for the startups, especially, I think they need to focus a lot more on being able to communicate what they are doing to potential investors, and because when everything is going hunky dory, then people come to you, people are on the lookout for you. But at this time, it's just the reverse. So you need to develop a communication strategy, and I think here the bigger private sector players can help the smaller ones in that direction. And finally, let me say that for the bigger ones, this is the sort of time when they can think in terms of improving the degree of self-regulation, because self-regulation will, in my view, be the basis of creating a much better trust between the private sector and the government. So that because if we know that we are the body is self-regulating, and we can depend on each other, we can trust each other, then we can replace the current climate of in some sense fear or mutual suspicion with that of trust, and then work together in real terms with India Inc. Because out there in the global market, you've got to work together to make a success of it, and to improve your market shares. So I think those are the areas that I would think the private sector can help a lot. So in capacity building, technology upgradation, improvement in market information systems, finding joint partners for the changing regional and global value chains, and starting a degree of self-regulation to build the trust between the government and the private sector.
Right. No, I think that's a very important point. There is certainly a very evident sort of trust deficit, which has sort of formed a bit of a chasm, if you will, in the last few years between the private sector and various government bodies. And
there's been a chasm since the beginning. This government versus industry has been the case forever and ever. I don't remember when it was not. And I think that is where the regulatory and compliance burden has kept increasing over time. So to the extent that it has at the moment almost become unbearable. As Manish Sabharwal points out, we today have 56,000 regulatory and compliance requirements. Now, all of that has to be whittled down for us to become globally competitive. So that's the basis of that is to create a modicum of trust, a body of trust between the government and the industry.
True. So, given the advent of digitalization and the velocity that has been perpetuated because of the pandemic, and now people are working from home, there is early signs of sort of reverse migration from the key large sort of commercial metros and commercial hubs where people are going back to tier two or even tier three cities. Do you see that there will be opportunity for a more widespread growth model, rather than focusing on mega cities alone? Do you see that we'll be able to look at, more widespread growth across the country? And what would that, really mean for, let's say real estate or, markets in general?
I mean, as digitization takes root, and as we get better connectivity across the country, and as, for example, the BharatNet program, completes its, mandate of connecting all the Gram Sabhas, 250,000 Gram Sabhas, etc. What you say will happen surely, because people will try to be away from congested, polluted, time guzzling metro cities and so on, and avoid the sort of commute, long-term commute, etc., and be in places where they can be, where work and home can be close together, if not located in the same way. So I think that will happen, and should surely happen in the services in the professional sector, who can provide services, through digital means. And I know, for example, of a very large 9,000 crore company who had headquarters in Chennai, but have now moved. He's now himself moved to a village near the border between Kerala and Tamil Nadu, near Madurai. I think this company is called, I forget, Zombo or
I think so.
Anyway.
Zoho.
Huh? Zoho. Zoho has done that, and I think Zoho model will be replicated as far as is going on. The second aspect of this is that, again related to the services, that Ayushman Bharat, the PMJAY, has now, because of its provision of 5 lakh of rupees to cover hospital procedures, etc., has effectively put that sort of purchasing power in the pockets of all those who reside in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. True. So they are there, and so therefore there would be a supply response on the health side, where the health infrastructure would grow much faster, much more in the tier 2, 3, 4 cities, where there is none at the moment. And so, which is what causes the rush to the hospitals in the metros and large towns. So that's the other thing that you can have. And finally, I think because of this better connectivity, even manufacturing could be moving out, as it were, because you can, while I see the problem in physical movement of both inputs and outputs, at least better communication enables you to be able to arrange all of this in a much better, more systematic manner. So I think this will happen, but let's be very clear that we don't see a dispersal of the manufacturing sector in a very large way until you get your 3D printing in much better, so that because then you don't need to be in any place simple. But I think in the services sector, and surely this will happen, and I think the self-employment would be made easier at this time because of the digitization, and more people may take to that.
Right. So you mentioned something really important about the healthcare sector and how the Ayushman Bharat is providing a massive fillip infrastructure-wise and in terms of supply. The pandemic has also, forced people in many ways to start relooking at their own health, wellness, and looking at, mental health in a big way. What is your view on some of the trends and some of the sort of key factors going forward in this area?
I mean, the pandemic has highlighted, if like nothing, much more, the need for individual resilience. Because you are suddenly cut off from social interaction. You are, and that's on the one hand. Now, on the other hand, you are forced to live in close company of your family members because nobody is going out, and so you've got to be spending all the time all together, and that creates its own pressures, as it were. The third is that because the distinction between home and office is obliterated, therefore you need to be much more mentally agile to make boundaries within the same location, so that you don't see your work spreading through your day and through your night, as it were. I've seen this happening, at least with my sons, at least, that, and I had to warn them, that they're now both working from home, and work never stops. So and it just goes on. So I think all of those things require a very require a positive change in your mental attitudes and your mental strength, if you like, and therefore what you need is some fallback, some recourse to people, to services, to practices which will give you that. Now, for example, I myself have practiced meditation, Sahaj Yoga, for years, and I find that a very, very valuable, part of my keeping my health together. So that's, and I think that will become more and more popular. That should become more and more popular. And the other thing is, of course, that physical health too becomes even important, and you are living in confined spaces, and therefore you need to figure out what is the way that you're handling it. So we need. The crisis has shown that that some regime, some routine, some immunity enhancing methods, and some degree of mental balance, achieving that and keeping yourself going are very important factors. And I think people are beginning to realize it. I find more and more that people are, the much larger number of people are tuning into these online services than earlier. So I think that's something that we have to do going forward.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for gracing us virtually and for sharing your views. It's been an honor and a pleasure, sir.
Thank you, Kumar. Thank you for having me, and wonderful being connected to you and being able to participate in this event. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.